In came Eric Lamelas.
Yep.
Roberto Soldado, Etienne Capoue, Vlad Kirikesh, Paulinho, Nasser Chadli and Christian Eriksen. Now we hear that Lamela is heading out of Tottenham for Seville.
Yep.
He will be effectively the last of those seven from the post-Bale recruitment drive of 2013 to leave the club. I mean, does his departure, will it epitomise a recent period in Tottenham's history that, I don't know, how would you describe it? There was a host of promise with those players, but that promise was never delivered.
Some of that promise was realised in other places. And it's the nature of the beast. I mean, if you look at the dynamics of what Tottenham did, they spent £76 million of that 89 million quid and managed to recoup 57 million of it for the sale of these players. So, in the great scheme of things, they lost 23%. But you can look at football transfers all the time. With the greatest respect in the world to the previous guest, Ben Gibson was bought for £15 million by Burnley. It was a move that didn't work out, and I think the transfer fee, if there was one to Norwich, was vastly different. It's the nature of the beast. What you need to look at is Daniel's ability to be able to recoup and rinse out some money from these players that ultimately didn't do what they were bought for. One of the components of that decision-making process, I think I'm right in saying, was the fact that AVB was in situ at the time.
Yes.
And I think you've got to put some of the blame about a lot of those transfers into his backyard, because not only did he not do very well at Tottenham, he also bought a series of players that didn't do very well. And some of them have gone on and done better in other environments. And obviously, with recent situations to one side, Christian Eriksen went on to obviously do very well for Tottenham and obviously go on to do Inter Milan and do very well.
Yeah, but the rest...
It does. Yeah, okay, but if you look at that and say you've bought seven... They're not the only players that were bought. They were the immediate proceeds. So if you look at that 7-year period and suggest that ultimately you just want to conflate the 7 players that were bought into that 7-year period and judge Tottenham by that, then okay, you've got to take into consideration that Tottenham have had real opportunities during that time to be a winning football club rather than a very competitive one.
Yeah.
Because Tottenham have been arguably one of the most competitive clubs over the last 4 or 5 years, with Champions League finals, finished from third in the Premier League, cup semi-finals and real opportunities to have won something. Off the pitch, it's unarguable that Tottenham, up until recent times, have been a lightning rod for how a football club should be run, on a wage structure, the building of the best stadium in the world, and financial results that have been absolutely phenomenal. But I suppose these would look like a score report of Tottenham Hotspur participating but never actually winning. And these sort of 7 players suggest that Daniel Levy is able to get himself out of bad situations where they bought pups and turn them into something that's not as bad as transactions that could have gone a different way. Because if you've got £76 million worth of players there, which they paid for these players, and none of them have really tripped the light fantastic besides Christian Eriksen.
Apart from Eriksen.
Right?
Yeah.
And you've managed to get 80% of the money back on those, then you're doing something right in your ability to be able to do business. But that doesn't help the bigger picture of Tottenham Hotspur as a football club that has a desperate pursuit for its fans to actually put silverware in the cabinet. And the bigger picture will be, alongside all these players, you've had the Dele Allis, you've had the Harry Kanes, you've had the Danny Rose, you've had the centre-half pairing that was at one point setting the light of the world. You had Carl Walkers of the world, you've had the Hugo Llorises of the world, and you've not really won, and you're now in a state of flux where you really don't know what you are. You've got a manager that will be decent but doesn't set the fan base alight. So I think you look at this and say, does it epitomise the period in Tottenham's history, a host of promise? Well, it has to, doesn't it? Because these players were bought on the back of the world's best player at the time, Gareth Bale, or arguably one of the world's best players, giving you the money to go and replace him, and you didn't replace him with anybody of any significance to be able to catapult the club forward, alongside a generation of players that came in that you didn't get the best of, alongside arguably a manager in Pochettino that you didn't get the best of because he didn't win or he isn't capable of delivering the best.
Right.
So I think the answer to the question is, it probably does epitomise Spurs.
I just wonder though, Simon, after that, and you splurge a lot of cash on Soldado, Capoue, Kirikesh, Paulinho, Chadli and
you get
Eriksen.
the bulk of it back.
Not to mention Eric Lamelas. Okay, you get the bulk of it back. But does it not show that Tottenham should have learnt their lesson should they come into another windfall? And of course, who am I thinking of? Harry Kane.
Yeah.
Could be 100 plus.
Well, yeah and no. I mean, the biggest decision-making process then was who was the manager and how did he deploy those funds. And you have to look at that and say, well, AVB was the manager, I think. And if that's the case, then you answer your own question. And you might find yourself in a situation where we could be saying this about Nuno Espirito Santo, but he's had not an insubstantial amount of money put behind him at Wolves. he's had the ability to be able to recruit decent players. And I think if you look at his blueprint at Wolves, whether you like the style of football that he plays, and I know there was argument from Danny Murphy and I think Trevor Sinclair that he's a pragmatic rather than an attacking manager.
Right.
But look at the players they've had at Wolves that he's been responsible for buying, whether it's Neves, Jimenez, Diego Jota, or whether it's Adama Traore. These are attacking front foot players that if you bought for Tottenham, with respect, you wouldn't say, well, I'll tell you what, these aren't bad. Because you look at that list of players I just reeled off, if he was responsible for bringing that list of players in, rather than this list of players, you'd say Nuno Espirito Santo was the man for me.
But what it does prove is that recruitment is hit and miss. We've always thought it, but that proves it.
Well, it does, because all recruitment is hit and miss, because you're trying to run on a ratio where you get more right than you get wrong. And if these are the only 7 players that have been signed over the 7-year period that we're talking about, then ultimately they've got 100% failure rate, or with the exception of Ericsson, probably an 80% failure rate. But this isn't the only 7 players they've signed. This is the deployment of the money that Gareth Bale. So when you're
those 7 are specifically the Bale money.
Yeah. So when you're deploying the logic of saying Gareth Bale goes out the door, and what do you replace him with? You replaced him with 5 or 6 pups. In Tottenham terms, because some of these players have gone on and done other things in other clubs and not been half bad. Right? They just didn't hit the ground running at Tottenham for a variety of reasons. So if you're comparing and contrasting what the Bale money was spent on, then it was wasted, but you still got 80% of it back.
Yeah.
Jim White and Simon Jordan, Monday to Thursday morning, 10 till 1. On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.